Social justice means applying the law equally to all people, but in practice, that doesn't always happen. I'm John Gonzalez. I'm here with my former law partner, Jack DeRora. We practice law, we seek social justice. On this show, we reveal the conflict between the two.
You know, for a while, it was just us in the office over a cup of coffee talking about the news of the day. With social justice issues dominating our culture, our focus became how do we, as lawyers, make a difference?
And now it's not just us. Today we have Reverend Derrick Holmes, pastor of the Union Grove Baptist Church of Columbus, to discuss a pastor's role in politics. Welcome, Reverend Holmes.
Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Jack, I think I've told you what a incredible experience visiting Black Baptist churches was when I was running for judge in Franklin County. One of the things the Republican Party wanted us to do was to get out into the community and meet everybody that we could. And I was invited to some of the churches and attended a church service. And an incredible, uplifting experience. Each one of the churches, I still remember to this day how wonderful it was listening to the pastors with the passion and the message and the way that the community responded to it. And, you know, we think about our subject today about politics, and politics is all about leadership. And the pastors that I listened to and were inspired by in the name of the Lord, yeah, I'd vote for them in a heartbeat if they wanted to run for office. Have you ever had that experience?
I've had less experience than you, regrettably, with Black churches or Black Baptist churches, but certainly it's hard not to notice the level of joy and level of enthusiasm. It's a wonderful thing.
One of the things I missed, but I know since you're older than me, you didn't, was the civil rights movement. And you think about a pastor that used the pulpit to advocate for justice and equal rights, Dr. Martin Luther King.
He knew how to get a message across. By the way, taking a left turn here, you know, when he wrote that letter he wrote his famous letter. He was in a jail cell, and he still crafted this beautiful piece in the confines of a jail cell. And then, of course, when you heard him speak, you had to pay attention.
Well, you know, when I think about the speeches that he had and the presence that he had, I don't think of it in terms of what's going on today with our political leaders really coming into conflict with our church leaders. And it must have happened because he was such an influential figure. I know he opposed the Vietnam War.
Oh, you're saying you didn't see a conflict with...
Well, of course, I was only 8 years old at the time, but I'm just saying that even when you think back or read back to those days, you know, I wonder how much conflict there was.
Well, there had to be conflict in terms of the law. I don't recall. Maybe this is because I was a few years older, but still very young. Actually, government officials criticizing him directly. Maybe I've got that wrong, and maybe Pastor Holmes can correct us on that.
What is going on these days, and is it similar to what somebody like Dr. Martin Luther King went through, you know, back in the 60s and 70s?
Very much so. And by the way, I just want to hold space for the fact that I'm just loving the direction of this conversation. Oh, we are in my wheelhouse. In fact, we say this at Union Grove. Right now, you all are cooking with grease because when I think about the moment we're in, my contention is that it is absolutely reflective of where things were 40s, 50s, 60s in our nation. When Dr. King writes that letter from the Birmingham jail, right, there's something about not just the content, but the context by which that happens. He's writing it dealing with the realities of what we would understand now as the prison industrial complex, right? Like there's all of these things that are happening. And then he's operating in the best sense of what, in my tradition, we would understand as being prophetic. And I love what you said around, or what Gonzo said around the notion of understanding the pulpit in this way that speaks to what's going on in terms of politics, in terms of how we should be thinking civically. Dr. King, in particular, comes from a long tradition of that understanding. So whether that's Dr. King, whether that's Ralph Abernathy, whether that's Vernon Johns, right? There's just a long list, a great cloud of witnesses, right? Who absolutely understand that it's not just the goodness and the grace and the mercy of God, but also the justice and the righteousness of God. You make mention of that. You mentioned it's my favorite Dr. King speech, why I oppose the war in Vietnam. I know we hold up I Have a Dream, and it's largely considered one of the greatest pieces of American oration, right? And we should certainly hold space for that. But for me, why I oppose the war in Vietnam, where there's a line in the beginning, it's actually the first line. He says, "There comes a moment where silence is betrayal."
Wow.
I love that framing. Silence. It almost presupposes that I can't be quiet. If I am, I'm betraying not only the God that I'm connected to, but the tradition that I come out of and the constituency that I'm accountable toward. And so I think we're very much in that moment now where we have to have some anointed audacity, be able to speak truth to power.
But if I can, and by the way, that is a tremendous first line where silence is betrayal. But the situation is different in that back in the day, it was the civil rights movement, social justice, and Martin Luther King versus an oppressive code of conduct in America and oppressive laws. Mm-hmm. Here we got a third element, I think. And I think the third element is that rather large contingency of Christians who apparently love Jesus but have nothing to do or don't advocate his message. Mm. And so it's a Christianity that is Christian in name only and really politically focused. Respond to that. Am I missing something?
No. I do think that there's some context to that too. I think that it manifests in different ways in 2026. We could have a larger conversation about the way in which the church universal understands itself, the realities of Christian nationalism, the way in which the notion of Christ is being used to forward certain political agenda. Much of that, to my contention, is very oppressive, particularly to Black and brown, poor white folk, and right. We could have a conversation around that. But what I would offer in concert with what you're saying is that when we go back historically, 50s, 60s in particular, there was that same ethic around where we believe in this aspect of Jesus, but maybe not the more uncomfortable part of Christianity, the part that challenges oppressive apparatus, right? Let me frame how I'm thinking about this, the argument I'm making. I pastor at the historic Union Grove Baptist Church. Our church is the third oldest Black church in the city of Columbus. It is a matter of history, and not because I have a very obvious bias, but a matter of history, that our church was the first church that Martin Luther King came to preach in when he was in Columbus. And the reason why that's a reality is not only because of his relationship to our pastor emeritus, the Reverend Dr. Fail Hale, but also because Martin Luther King wasn't popular during that time. Oh. There were many people who considered him inflammatory, even in what would be the North, right? There were people who considered his message and whether or not he was triggering white fear. And when I say white, I'm talking about a state of mind and an ideology, right? That he triggered some of that, didn't want to welcome. Those were problems in the South, right? And so he just wasn't popular in that way. There were many folk who understood Jesus a certain type of way. No one argued about his believership, but when he was making the connection between righteousness, right? And activism, right? That became something that was problematic for a lot of people. Dr. King is far more popular now in 2026 than what he was in the heyday of the civil rights movement that he was privileged to lead. So I think you're right? And I think we should have a conversation around Christian nationalism, what that looks like, and the ways in which it does look different, the ways in which it's promoted. We have media at disposal now. I think there are a lot of people that are just frustrated and feel hopeless in a lot of ways, right? So the response isn't as robust. But my contention is that when we look back historically, there was still some of that. We go to church on Sunday. You know, the Klan had crosses on there, right? So there was a way in which where I understand my spirituality that doesn't affect my sociology in a way.
You know, that's a great reminder. Thank you.
You know, living it today, it strikes me kind of on your point, Jack, is that we can listen to reverends, pastors, the Pope talk about the morality of war. But what strikes me as kind of concerning is when our political leaders want to debate theology with the Pope. Not you know, what's going on in the world, whether this war is justified or not, but do you really want to talk theology with the Pope? And it strikes me that the political leaders think they know more about Christianity than the Pope. Now, that's in your wheelhouse, right?
You know, as arrogant as I might be at times, I would not challenge the Pope on theology. So I think that just speaks to the hubris of the administration. Simple as that.
Well, it just seems to be a ridiculous fight to pick. You know, one of the things they teach us lawyers when we're going against, especially like medical experts, is don't argue the medicine with the experts, right? You got to pick other battles, and I just don't see the reason that they're arguing with the Pope. But it may be that, at least from my perspective, it's the first time that a Pope has called out a president pretty directly. One of the things that he said was, a person who thinks only about building walls is not a Christian.
Was that Leo or Francis? Right, Francis,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty direct, right?
Well, now that leads me to a question for Pastor Holmes, unless I'm breaking your stride.
Go ahead.
There seems to be this debate that pastors shouldn't get political. Now, I grew up, as I told you, in the Catholic Church. I don't think I ever heard anything political in the Catholic Church, right? But as I'm going through some of your YouTube excerpts, Pastor Holmes is exhorting his congregation to contact our U.S. senators about ICE.
Yeah.
And it was well done, but I got to believe there are people who would say, that's not your province. Respond to that.
Thank you for the question. For those who would make the argument that the role of a pastor, clergy person, is not to be civically engaged, I would invite them to study some Bible.
Okay.
It is very difficult from Genesis to the Revelation to not see an ethic and undercurrent of justice and righteousness and equity within the text. God doesn't play favorites, right? And that's at the underpinning of what it is that we believe. One of the things we say at our church, Bible says in John 3:16, which I believe every Christian knows, right? For God so loved the world, gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth, right? There's no qualified, doesn't say just if the white folk believe, or the black folk believe, or the rich believe, or the poor believe, right? All through the text, you see this ethic of how to treat strangers and how to welcome foreigners and how to take care of those that are in need. Jesus's entire ministry is very much connected to helping the poor, right? And setting captives free. That's an amazing thing to think about if we're talking about Christianity as a spiritual discipline that follows the life model of Jesus. And the first thing that he says after his wilderness experience is, now I am ready, right, to preach the good news to the poor, right, to give sight to the blind, to set captives free. That's at the forefront of his ministry. The first two things that Jesus is talking about is restoring citizens and universal health care. That's another conversation for another day. So I think that when my argument in response to those who would say that the clergy person who purports to be Christian doesn't have a responsibility to be civically engaged, is that I would just invite them to some Bible, and not just reading of Bible, but studying of Bible.
Boy, there's certainly a difference between the two. So maybe another way of saying it is that social justice is part and parcel of Christianity?
Absolutely, absolutely. That when you look at here's Bible study on the pod, right? So the Bible is written across a great span of centuries with oppression as a central theme, right? There are 6 empires that are in rule in the Bible, and apart from a very small portion in the wisdom books of the Psalms, the majority of the Bible is written and dealing with people who are dealing with the reality of oppression. It is a poor study and poor treatment of text to navigate the Bible and read it from the lens of the empire, which is part of why I think we end up with what we deal with now presently and what we've dealt with across the span of maybe American Christianity. It's why in other countries, the Christianity there doesn't look the same way it does here in America, right? Because there's this understanding that you can't look at Christianity from the lens of the oppressor. You have to do what Dr. James Cone says, and you have to look at it from the God of the oppressed, right? So how are they experiencing this, right? How are they experiencing Egyptian oppression or Babylonian oppression or Persian oppression or Roman oppression? And for me, we live in the largest empire since the one that killed Jesus. So how are we not allowing that perspective of text to then inform our spiritual disciplines and our function? I've struggled very heavily with clergy persons. And I'm not saying that you have to go and do everything. In fact, my polite pushback, right, my goal isn't necessarily to be political, but my goal is definitely to be civically engaged. I think that it's not about, because I think when some people hear politic, they get into the red and the blue and the right. Sure. And the truth is we're allowed to think for ourselves too. And I think what I'm more fascinated with, what I believe God is more fascinated with, is the idea of what it means to just be on the side of what God says is right. And if I can do that, I don't necessarily care. Look, y'all can play the popularity contest. That's fine, right? But what I'm more fascinated with, what our church is more fascinated with, and the things that we've seen in this country that have moved the needle in terms of civil rights, in terms of equity, have been the things that are just right before God. And if it's right before God and I'm choosing to believe in that God, then why wouldn't I be willing to fight for it? Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. Sure. What makes me think about when you say that is that, obviously President Trump has a spiritual advisor, many of them. I saw a picture of about 20 of them putting their hands on him one day. But do you have a legal advisor? Because there are some legal and I'm assuming some ethical limits to how far you can, I don't know, I want to call it advocate or politic. How far can you go?
I do have people that I talk to, persons who I have a relationship with if I feel like I'm at the edge. But I'll share with you that I believe the most free person in the United States is the Black preacher. I think there's something about, I come out of a tradition that's very much connected to truth-telling. We were talking about this in the lobby. It's not just saying it, but I have an accountability to not only say it, but say it how it is. There are people who look to me to be able to be honest about a thing. And so weekly, I'm reconciling the honesty of a thing with the dignity and integrity of being a pastor in a pulpit, right? So, and I don't think I have to sacrifice one for the other. I think there's a best answer that's the right way to be truthful and be accountable to the base. And I'm using political discourse now, right? But to be accountable to the base, to my constituency, but to also do that in a way that liberates folk. Because there's something about when a leader can speak to your suffering in a way that maybe you're not able to, and to say that there's a God that can be responsive to it and attentive to it and even cares about it and is on your side of it when it's happening to you. And so for me, I do have folk that, I talk to every now and then, but I'm also clear. So for example, just to support what you're saying, Gonzo, I don't endorse elected officials, right? I just don't. I have colleagues that do, and that's fine. No harm, no foul, no judgment. I don't want anyone to hear this thinking that I'm throwing shots at anybody. I'm not. I'm just talking about me, right? I don't endorse. And the reason I don't endorse is I don't feel like it's my job to endorse. I feel like it's our job to hold people accountable, right? And so we have town halls at our church, and we have community forums, and we invite elected officials to come and share your platform, and we invite the community to come, so that way we want to hear it. Yes, we want to hear what it is that you're doing, and then we want to hold you accountable to it. So should you be elected to office, now we have something to hold you accountable to. And if you're not working for us, then you won't work for us. So I feel I think that I do have people that I talk to, but I'm not as concerned about the line. I'm a lot more concerned about being honest and being genuine and being authentic. And I think there's something liberatory about that.
When you speak about hearing or watching other pastors, I sometimes think, and I know, Jack, you do this too, but as lawyers, when we look at some of the lawyers that work for the Trump administration, Todd Blanche or Pam Bondi, yeah. You just shake your head going, really, that's what's representing, our legal profession. And I got to imagine you have to be doing some of that when you listen to some of the pastors talk about Trump or even who's the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson,
who
talking about the Bible verses.
Yeah.
Mike Johnson, who made it clear the day he took the speakership that all we had to look to understand him was to look to the Bible.
Yeah.
It's got to make you shake your head.
It does. It's making me shake it right now because here's the truth. In fact, I'm doing what you just said just now. I was getting ready to say something, and then I went through my filter. It literally just happened right now, right? The truth is that Speaker Johnson's remark comes from a certain perspective that he brings to the biblical text, right? So just like we were talking about people who tell us whether we're on brand, whether we're off, whether we're at the line, there's someone who told him, let's presume that he goes to church every week. Let's presume that, right? He's sitting in a congregation where at least once or twice he's hearing from the leader of that congregation, and certainly from the people who he's worshiping with and the people he's fellowshipping with, his Sunday school teacher, he's hearing that there's a certain way that you should be thinking about the Bible that lends to this type of function. So that's why he has no problem saying that into a microphone. The problem with that is that, and again, this goes back to our point around reading and studying, we've created a context where we're actually in an anti-intellectual age. Like I believe that fundamentally. I think we're in a moment where it's real easy not to think, right? So the first time you tell someone to maybe, no, this takes a little bit more depth. No, it's more than just the words, right? That gives people pause. So maybe Speaker Johnson is in a context where they don't have to study and they can just read. So then he can read a text literally and then use that text, abuse it in a way that forwards an agenda around improper immigration procedure, right? Like I just think that there's an opportunity to maybe push back and, to your point, maybe not let the ignorance in the best sense of that word and the misinterpretation of the text stand. We should be Christian enough to say, okay, I heard what he said. Jesus did this all the time, right? Mm-hmm. When Jesus is in the temple, you have heard it said this. In fact, here's Bible study for everybody listening to the pod. Anytime you're in the Bible and you hear Jesus saying, you have heard it said this, right, Jesus is undoing the thing that they've learned that had nothing to do with what the text was actually saying. So I think we're in a moment where we have to do the same.
It was always, this is what you have been told. This is what I say.
That's what I say, right? Yeah. Exactly. And I think we need to be on that.
I like to think of the actions of our politicians as somehow being directed or scripted. I mean, my wife was in politics for a while, and I think maybe there's, I don't know, more discipline back then, you know, as far as the party as a whole. But, you know, somebody says something stupid or something controversial. Pope said this, we say that. Then it's like, cue Mike Johnson.
Oh, yeah, right.
Like, how does he get the word to come out and say something? Like, you know, it just seems to me it'd be better for him just to not, because you're right. He did come out and say, hey, the Bible is my guiding, you know, light, and, you know, that's the way I'm going to make decisions. And then, you know, you listen to him and you think, no, you're not doing that at all. Which brings me to your congregation or the people in your orbit. You know, we don't all think alike. Do you get some pushback? Do people are like, hey, you know, well, we'd love to hear you on Sunday. Can you just keep it to the, you know, the pulpit? You getting any of that?
Not much, but I do.
Yeah.
Not I do. We take a lot of pride in being a place where we can all meet at the feet of the cross. And we don't have to think the same thing. We don't have to, our experiences are different, right? My job, one of the challenges of my job that I welcome is that I heard someone else say it this way, and I'm quoting them, that it's not my job to make you think what I think. It's just my job to make sure you're thinking.
Oh, I like that.
Right? So,
I like that a lot, too.
So the goal is to, I've had moments where, you know, Pastor, you know, they're going to come and close our church down, fooling with you, right? And like Reverend Ralph Abernathy says, I think I'm just too crazy to be scared. Like I'm just not, I'm not concerned about that. Again, what I'm more concerned around is truth telling. As one who espouses a particular theology around Christianity, I espouse liberative theology.
Liberative, I like that.
Liberative theology. So to my mind, when I get those pushbacks, I welcome them, I respect it. But also this is just where I come down. And most of all, I believe this is what God is saying in that way. So
actually, this notion of liberation theology, I mean, this is part and parcel of Black Christianity, because liberation had real meaning for Blacks and prior to the Emancipation Proclamation.
Sure.
I mean, that's really what religion was all about for those folks.
Absolutely. And let me even go further back. Thank you for lifting it. Y'all in y'all bag right now. I appreciate it.
Cooking with grease.
Yeah, y'all cooking with all the grease today.
I like that.
When we talk about Black Christianity, qua liberation theology, there are some things that we have to understand before we even get here to the colonies, before it becomes the United States, right? Christianity existed before we got here. It wasn't this thing that we adopted when we got to the Americas, right? Christianity, and by the way, that's in the Bible too, right? So there were Africans who very much espoused this understanding of God through Jesus Christ, this movement of the Holy Spirit that was very much connected to being liberated, right? To not being free, because you're born free, but there's something about being liberated where I'm not bound by anything that would compromise my agency, keep me from operating in the fullness of how I understand myself. By the time we get here and Africans are enslaved, there's a way in which Christianity is co-opted and manipulated in a way so that way they are servile to the building of an empire. And what happened while that was going on is that there were these Nat Turners and these Denmark VCs who were preaching and operating in Brush Harbor spirituality, and they were doing the same thing that you and I were just talking about, that, okay, I know that's what they said. And they told you that the Bible said slaves be obedient to your masters. But just because that's what that text in the Bible might say, that's not the God of liberation. God says, let my people go. Right? And so there's always that understanding, this where we wanted to operate in a way where we wanted God to be bigger than the Bible. Right? The Reverend Dr. Valerie Bridgman says, if God can't be bigger than your Bible is God. right? That there's a way in which we should be thinking about understanding the voice of God and what is God actually about. And if our function is informed by an interpretation of text that doesn't sound like God, then the problem isn't with the Bible, the problem's with our interpretation.
You know, the former Holocaust survivor, Eli Wiesel, I'm not saying that right, he had a thought. He said, if you're reading the Bible and it's inconsistent with what you think is right ethically or morally, you get to argue with God about that.
Yeah.
Something to that effect, right?
Yeah. I think I'm familiar with the quote, and I 300% agree. Listen, we will have to sit before God one day. For those of us who ascribe to a Christian faith base, if we're right, because, by the way, nobody debates heaven and hell that much, right? Most of us agree on a day of judgment, a day of reckoning, a day of atonement, right? We'll have to sit before God one day, and we'll have to give an account for what we've done, what we've handled, what we've mishandled with regard to what God's desire was in the first place. Scary thing.
I liked what you said about being liberated. I can think back to Ann's political career and the number of conservative functions I went to where I had to hold my tongue. Now I could have said what I was thinking, but I really didn't have the ability to do that in the context. But when we think about dissent, I was asking about people in your congregation or others, and I like the way you handle that. And I do think a part of intellectual honesty is humility, which is we could be wrong.
Absolutely.
And we're not going to know that unless somebody disagrees with us and gives you a different perspective. But I also agree that there is an intellectual decline, and here's why I think, and it's really stark in the practice of law. We don't have to work for information like we used to.
Right.
You used to, when I started law school, you had to go into the library and open a book and read and try to understand what was being taught. Now I've got clients that do Chat GDP and Copilot and tell me the law in 2 seconds, right? And so I do think that you don't get that deeper thought process in understanding because you're just not working for it. Now, that's not an original thought. I hasten to add, I learned that from Jon Stewart, listening to him. But it made me think, I think he's right. And I'm getting it through mass media, but that's the way I think about the intellectual decline.
What you're also pointing to is also a lack of critical thinking. So it's not just absorbing a thing, right? But I'm thinking about how this applies to the context that I'm operating in and out of, right? And I think when we're able to do that, I think that marriage of maybe information and critical thinking, I think that's where genius happens. I think that's where innovation happens. I think that's where progress happens. And I think the absence of that.
You go old school and you think about, the way Jesus taught us. He would use parables, and you would have to take that and apply it. Right,
exactly.
He wasn't giving us the answer. He was showing us the way that you could think about the answer. And I remember somebody saying, just tell me what I'm supposed to know. Why are you making me think about it? But so you've been able to walk this line between politics and faith, but it seems to me that you're also driven to it. And why is that? Why are you in that position to be doing this?
I'm going to be churchy for a moment. By the grace of God, there's no qualification. God can choose those infinitely more intelligent, infinitely more gifted. And somehow God looks in the Parkchester community of the Bronx, New York, and says, I'll choose this one to go ahead and do my will. I come out of a context that very much understood itself that way. I was born in Harlem, raised in the Bronx. I grew up at the St. Martin's Episcopal Church, historic church in Harlem, USA. It would be what we would understand as a liberationist church. So the church I grew up in was one where we not only sung hymns, for those who might not be familiar, you talk about Episcopal churches, they're it's not Baptist and it's not Catholic. It's like quarter till. maybe quarter till the Baptist end and half past the Catholic end, right? Yeah. But it was also informed with the best of Black tradition. It was the call and response tradition that we were talking about, where it's not just the preacher talking, but you talk back to the preacher. The music is on the 2 and the 4 and not the 1 and the 3, right? Just all these other different nuances. But after the benediction, we would go out and we would go canvassing. Or I would see programming where we would have elected officials come to worship, but not because they were looking for votes, because we had organized the community. And if you said you wanted to serve us, we need to hear what it is that you plan to do. Or we meet with the mayor. For those who might be listening from New York, I'm throwing out way back names now. When Ed Koch was the mayor in New York, right? Yeah. We'd have him come to the congregation and we would talk about the stuff that's wrong and then hold him accountable to try and fix it. When David Dinkins, the first Black mayor to run for the mayorship in New York City, ran, one of the first churches he went to was our church. I got to see that as a child, that it wasn't just, yes, we get together, and yes, we fellowship, and yes, we break bread, and it's all these other things, and these deep, beautiful moments of spirituality and liberation of not only body, but also mind. But it was also that we were outside. And we understood that we had a responsibility to do our part. We can't wait on anybody to do it. We can't wait on the empire to do it. There is nothing that has happened for the community that I'm the most concerned about that has come through the beneficence of maybe those on the other end of the aisle. The needle is pushed when we kind of make the way. And so I came up seeing that. And so by the time a call to ministry happened, I didn't know that you could do church another way. I really didn't. I was shocked. Wait, you mean you can just come and ask for money every week? Like, that's it? Wait, all we got to do is just quote some scripture and not live it? Oh, snap. Like, I didn't know that that was a thing. So for me, it was very much baked into the fabric of how I understand my religious experience.
But somehow, did I read that you got to Circleville or Chillicothe?
Yeah, Circleville, yeah.
Circleville. So, God works in mysterious ways.
Mysterious
Circleville.
ways.
It's hard to get there unless you're lost.
But I'll tell you what a beauty.
I'm kidding. Circleville is a wonderful.
It's a great place.
Yes,
it's a great place. No, I accepted a call to ministry. I discerned a sense of call to ministry at 13 years old in that church I was just telling you about. Mm-hmm. And that sounded crazy to me. Man, I ain't no preacher. What? No. Right? And so I did what many people do. I actually just ran from a call. Like, I'm not gonna do anything with that. But it never went anywhere. It was still that kind of sense, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I yielded to that. I didn't have any goals toward the pastorate. No. Mm-hmm. I was doing organizing work as a community organizer. I was a national organizer for a couple of organizations. I was traveling and going to high schools and talking about progressive politics. And that was just my lane. I was comfortable with that. I was really comfortable with that. I'm an activist at my core, at my heart. Mm-hmm. I kind of came up seeing that. If you think about New York City and if you think about Manhattan in particular, Adam Clayton Powell and Malcolm X, and right, there's just a long history of kind of civic engagement that really informed where I came down. And after accepting that call to ministry, this church in Circleville took a chance on a 30-plus-year-old preacher with no experience. Yeah.
Okay, that was your first gig as a pastor?
Yeah, that was my first pastorate.
And how'd your message go over in Circleville?
It went over well, surprisingly. I'm of the mind that the truth don't need no proof. Like, look, so I can't help what you do with it. This is just where I'm at and where I come down, and I'm just doing my best. And, I just let God handle the details. But a lot of people don't know this. In Circleville, the church I used to pastor, the Second Baptist Church, is the oldest Black church in that city. Pastor Jones is going to hear this. Pastor Jones is my daughter in the ministry who pastors the church now. And I'm totally going to get the year wrong, but 160, 170-something year old.
Beautiful.
The church was planted by a runaway African, was brought here, and instead of staying in the South and going to Canada, stopped in Circleville and planted a church around kind of serving community and worshiping. And that church still stands today. And they let me be their pastor for 10 years. And we saw growth, a deep sense of community because the context is more rural.
Sure.
So kind of everyone knows everybody. But there was just this sense of when we started, again, not just worship, but talking about what's just right and how people are treated, you know, and that there can be a voice that stands against it and helping people unlock their own power. Because, you know, that's what oppression does, right? It makes you feel like you don't have any power.
Sure it does.
So all often you need is just someone to say, no, it doesn't have to be this way. No, we can do another thing. And everything from prayer vigils for children who had lost their lives at the hands of law enforcement. I sat on the Pickaway County Board of Diversity there to making sure that every student was treated with dignity and equity.
Beautiful.
Just those type of things. So it was a really great experience. Really great experience. I wouldn't trade it.
That's a beautiful message. And I'm not surprised then that the way you sign your emails is revolutionary love.
With revolutionary love.
But let's talk for a minute. What is it sounds great. What does it mean?
So there are multiple meanings. The idea, the idea of revolution in my context very much means something that's agitational, that's disruptive, right? And I believe that the best of love is something that's disruptive. I think love can conquer anything. I think love calls you out of your seat. What we believe in a Christian context is that love caused God to send Jesus down here to die for the sins of humanity. And that's not just sympathy. That's not pity. That's understanding that the love that we exhibit has the power to change the thing around us. The love for my community will make me change my community. The love for this nation, even if it doesn't love me back, right? The love for this nation that my ancestors built for free and then got rewarded with being called lazy, but still having a love that it can still be the best of a thing, right? That's a revolutionary act. And so to the best of my ability, I want to operate in revolutionary love. I want to love you in a way that is transformative in the best sense of what it means to be changed for good.
Do you have you write, it says, "Are you up yet?" What is that? Is that a blog? Is it, I thought I saw one or two articles online.
Yeah. It's a blog. I'm getting back in the writing bag next month. I've just been really busy, but once a month, I operate out on my blog.
I like the title. Are you up yet? But what is it? Is it to?
It's trying to. It's a play on words. I'm a night owl. I'm a night owl, and a lot of times I'm up writing and thinking. When I was married, I would want to talk about the things that I was thinking about, get on her nerves. Like, oh my gosh, right? Can't you talk to me while I'm up, right? So then I would always like, well, hey, are you up yet, right?
Yeah.
Because I got this stuff on my mind and I want to, right? So it was that. It was also in the beginnings of when we were talking about being woke. And it was also at the beginnings of when the enemies of progress began to co-opt that language and turn it into something that it wasn't initially intended to be. And so kind of trying to reclaim some of that, but then not just let it be rhetoric, but also let it be something that's revolutionary. Let's talk about the practice. So, okay, we're woke, but hey, are we up yet? Mm-hmm. Because if all this stuff that's going on and we feel a way about it and we're tired of it, are we willing to change anything, right? Or are we just complaining? And so it's kind of that, me trying to, it was my attempt to be a provocateur.
Yeah, no, I like it, and it's a way to reach additional people, and
absolutely.
I think it's good. You also have, I saw a favorite Bible verse, Psalms 27:1, and can I read it, and then maybe you can tell me why it resonates with you. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Yeah, that's beautiful. What makes it resonate with you?
That I think the work of liberation, the work of righteousness, the work of justice, the work of equity the work of standing on your convictions is not for the timid. And there are enough things that face us to where it becomes easy to be afraid, to give in to fear. In fact, sometimes it even makes sense to be afraid. Our bodies trigger fear to protect us, right? And every time I look at that text, I read it every day, every day. I read. It's the first thing I read when I get to the office at work. And it just reminds me that in the face of that, in the face of an empire, in the face of critics, in the face of hard days, in the face of those who might not understand, in the dark and lonely moments of the soul, that I don't have to be afraid because God is my salvation. God's on my side. God's on the side of the righteous. God's on the side of justice. God's on the side of decency. And the God that's with me is bigger than the enemy that's in front of me. So while I might feel a moment of fear, I don't have to stay there because not only is God with me, but God is my salvation. So whatever it is that endangers me, God is going to save me from it.
Let's have an amen.
This is good. You're talking about that.
You think about some of our other discussions about so many people and companies that have capitulated out of fear.
Oh, sure.
The higher learning institutions and law firms and people. It's incredible. And the ones that stood up are now being lauded for that. So,
Absolutely.
I see so many social issues out there affecting our community, your specific community, and your confidence, your passion, your eloquence. I think it's well served, and I do believe that you're going to effectuate change. Appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
Man, I really appreciate it. Thank you all so much. What a blessing.
I'm so glad I met you at that protest because
Right.
It was serendipity. So
Wow.
how wonderful to meet you and how wonderful to hear the grace of your message today.
Wow. I appreciate it, man.
Our thanks to WOSU and our sound engineer, Dalton Jones. If you like what you've heard, tell a friend. We want this show to be more than just us. We want it to be all of us. Like us, follow us, submit a review, help elevate our profile so that other podcast listeners can find us. We'll be back soon with another important social justice issue. Until then, so long.